Funding for Brampton Memories of a Small Town has been brought to you in part by the Rotary Clubs of Brampton.
Hello, I'm Michael Seaman of the Brampton Heritage Board and welcome to Brampton, Memories of a Small Town. While the vast majority of heritage homes continue to follow their original use as private dwellings, it occasionally becomes possible for one of our levels of government to acquire some of the most significant examples of these buildings for use as museums. By doing this, the structure becomes a permanent link with the community's past that is accessible to all people and may be an attraction for tourists. It would be of most benefit, however, to children who would now have the opportunity to see their history they read in books to come alive before their eyes. In June 1990, the city of Brampton officially opened its first heritage property, the Bovaird House on Bovaird Drive east of Kennedy Road. The structure was generously donated to the city in 1984 by longtime Brampton Chinguacousy resident Mossy Bovaird, whose husband, the late William Bovaird, a former reeve of Chinguacousy Township, had long expressed his wish that the historic home be preserved for future generations. The house has now been restored to how it would have appeared between 1870 and 1900 and is currently used as a meeting place for local historical groups and a centre for programs and activities. It is ultimately hoped that the Bovaird House will be opened as a historical museum focusing on the latter half of the 1800s. To help achieve this goal of creating a historical museum, the Friends of the Bovaird House Committee was formed in 1991. This group of volunteers plan house activities and raise funds and awareness regarding the Bovaird House. The most important mandate, however, is to solicit donations of antiques and period furnishings which will ultimately be displayed in the future museum. I'm joined now by Linda Troy, a member of the Bovaird House Committee and a knowledgeable expert on the history of Bovaird House. Linda, could you tell us something about the history of Bovaird House?
We've done quite a bit of research on the history of the Bovaird House, and it's like a giant jigsaw puzzle. We don't have all the pieces. However, what we do know is that the very first owner of the land here was John Silverthorne, and he had received in 1819, he had received permission from the government to clear land. Unfortunately, he shot his wife, and he was in so much grief that he sold his lands to Peter Chisholm Sr. Now, Peter Chisholm was born in Scotland in 1796, and he was the one who built this Bovaird House. So he was a prosperous baker, and that was in New York City. And he moved his family from New York City to the Bovaird House. And this particular building, we believe, was built around about 1835 to 1940. 1840. And so the Bovaird House stayed in the Chisholm family for 100 years. And then it was rented by the Pearson, the Plant, and the Payne families. And then it was purchased by James Bovaird.
The Bovaird House is an excellent example of a mid-19th century Georgian farmhouse. I'm joined now by Deanne Obadowski of the Friends of the Bovaird House Committee. Deanne, could you give us a tour of the historic Bovaird House?
I'd love to, Michael. The Bovaird House sits on land which is vastly different from that in the early 1800s when it was first owned. You'll notice today that it's surrounded by subdivisions and developed areas. When it was first purchased by John Silverthorne in around 1819, it was a 100-acre parcel located in the township of Chinguacousy. It was densely forested and bushland. It was known as wolf country. The property then turned into the hands of the Chisholm family, and it began to be developed primarily through farming. The land was covered by wheat fields, and there were cattle and oxen. The property changed uses again in 1929 when James Bovaird took over the land. He was interested in breeding world-class racehorses and constructed a track which traveled around the Bovaird house property. He bred many world-class horses, including one called Royal Year. His son William Bovaird continued the use of breeding horses on the property and also had famous horses. He sold many of them to police forces in the Caribbean. He also raised one which you may have heard of, known as the Rose of Frome. In the mid-1960s and 70s, William Bovaird began to sever off small pieces of the land on which Bovaird House is situated. In the 70s, developers came in and he sold off larger parcels. However, he always maintained the property we're on now, as he wanted to preserve it from the encroach of subdivisions. In 1984, the house was donated to the city of Brampton by William Bovaird's widow, Mossy Bovaird. Unfortunately, in 1983, there was a fire on the property. It did damage to the carriage house and the garage. It also destroyed a barn which was on the property, which had been built by the Chisholm family and used for their animals. Interestingly, that barn had also been used for Presbyterian church services prior to St. Andrew's Church being built. Peter Chisholm was instrumental in having St. Andrew's Church being built, as he was a very devout Presbyterian. You'll notice there's a large number of spruce trees, and these were also planted by Mr. and Mrs. Bovaird. There's a little bit of a funny tale that goes with this. The Bovairds had some friends up by Camp Borden, and they said, why don't you come up and get some spruce trees? So the Bovairds borrowed a big truck, thinking they would get these lovely spruce trees. When they got there, they were just little seedlings. But as you'll see, they've grown into big, proud trees. We also have Mossy Bovaird's crabapple tree, which flowers at the front of the property. Now, I'd like to tell everyone about the house itself. It's restored back to the period between 1870 and 1900. We believe it was constructed between 1835 and 1840. It's a typical Georgian-style house. That style of house was common in Upper Canada, and this particular house was built on plans brought from the city of Boston. It was constructed entirely by local craftsmen and their apprentices, and there's several local features I'd like to point out. The house itself is built of locally quarried double clay red brick. Now, William Bovaird was known to say that the house was never damp based on this structure that was built in the 1840s with the double red brick. At the bottom, you'll notice it's constructed of locally quarried field stone. You'll see the windows at the bottom. Those lead light into the cellar so that the people down there could cook, what is the kitchen now, which you'll see a bit later. Typical of a Georgian-style house are its symmetrical features and very simple yet elegant design lines. You'll notice across the top of the house the 5 large bay windows. You'll also see the 2 chimneys. And around the door, you'll notice side lights, which were a decorative feature of the times. You'll notice on the front of the house there has been some stairs added. These were added during renovations and were not part of the original structure. The Bovairds had added a front covered veranda. However, this was removed as it was not fitting with the 1870 period. Now let's take a look inside the historic Bovaird house. If you'll come along, I'll give you a tour. Here we are inside the historic Bovaird house. This is what we refer to as the mud room. Now we have here before you a historic brick oven. As you heard earlier, Peter Chisholm was a baker by trade. When he came up to the Jacuzzi Township and built this lovely house, his priority was to have a baker's oven. And as you'll see here, he made this lovely brick oven. If we open it up, you'll see how deep it is. Now there's special brick in there, and we believe he brought that brick up from Kingston, and it's a special warming brick to keep the bread warm and to heat it up fairly quickly. Now what they would do is they would throw the coals in there and heat up the brick oven. Once the coals were heated, they would be thrown at the bottom to keep the oven warm. Now you'll notice we have some plaques on the wall here, and this is to commemorate Bovaird House being designated as a historic house in 1981 while it was still privately owned. William Bovaird applied for the designation. We have here behind me a door. Now if we were to open that, we would just see a modern garage. However, in the old days, it was a carriage room where the transportation means would be kept. Now in 1983, there was a fire to that part of the house. It happened while the Bovairds were living here. Someone was driving by and noticed smoke. They telephoned the Bovairds, they banged on the doors, and the Bovairds telephoned the fire department, and luckily the house was saved with only the carriage room being destroyed, which was very fortunate. Here we are in the present-day basement of the Bovaird house. At one time, this would have been the kitchen to the house, and it would have been the hub of activity, cooking, and eating. We have here the remnants of the original cooking fireplace. There are 4 fireplaces in the Bovaird house. They were used not only for cooking, but for heating purposes. Now, the ladies would have cooked in the good old days using this fireplace here, as well as the bread ovens. Now, they would have had if you can picture a crane device that would sit outside the fireplace, and then they would prepare the food in it and swing it into the fireplace so that their arms would not have to touch the fire. You may not know this, but one of the leading causes of death of women in pioneer days was that their clothing would catch on fire while they were cooking in the fireplace, resulting in very tragic accidents. Now, on the other side of the fireplace here, we have the remnants of another brick oven that would have been used for baking, mainly for bread. On special occasions, though, they would make cookies and cakes. You'll see here that we have the windows are larger than what you'd normally find in a basement. Now this is to let the light in because this was the kitchen and the family did eat down here and cook down here. It would also have been warm with the fireplace. So these windows had to allow the light to come in, and you'll notice there's a few of them here. The walls down here are just basic whitewashed. It would have been nothing fancy. We also have a staircase. You'll notice there were 2 here, one that would lead from the outside and one would lead into the inside of the house and was added later, we believe. We're here before the staircase which was added into the house at a later date. The original staircase is just behind me, and that was the concrete structure which led from the outside. As you'll see later, the summer kitchen was added to the property shortly after it was originally built. These stairs lead directly up to the servery, which when large special meals were prepared, the meals would be made down here, carried up the stairs to the servery, and then laid out there to be brought into the dining room. At the top of these stairs are also some storage shelves, which were possibly used to store pickles and other items through the winter. Off the main kitchen down here, we would have 2 other rooms, which are now used to house modern furnace equipment. In the old days, however, we believe it was used as a creamery or a buttery, and possibly for firewood storage. That's it. We've just come out of the loft, which is upstairs in the Bovaird house. The loft was used to house hired help during the summer. As we mentioned earlier, the Bovaird house property was used for extensive farming of various crops and cattle. Now, when the Chisholms, they had about 7 children. Well, they had 6 and then 1 died. The children would also sleep up in the loft. We have here another one of the Bovaird house fireplaces. This room that we're in right now is what would have been the summer kitchen. It originally would have had a flagstone floor, and it would have been very airy and very cool in the summer. The hired help would eat in here, and as well the ladies of the house would do the cooking in here. Now, what we have in here now is a more modern heating stove that has been inserted into the fireplace and in later years would have been used. Over here we have what we believe is a tin cupboard. You'll see that it's referred to as a tin cupboard because it's lined in tin. Now, tin was believed to have been a very effective storage material so that you could keep spices and breads and other foods that would spoil in there, and they would keep longer. This, of course, was before modern refrigeration. You'll notice we have here an antique sewing machine, and this is one of the many donations we've received at the Bovaird house. We're always seeking new furniture because, as you'll notice as we go out throughout the house, we're lacking in some of the very basic furniture. So if anyone out there has anything they'd like to donate, they can get in touch with the City of Brampton, and we also issue tax receipts for those purposes. In the summer kitchen now, we have meetings of the Friends of Bovaird House Committee, which is looking at the future of the home and what will be done with it.
We'll be right back after the break when we'll continue our look at historic Flower Town.
Funding for Brampton Memories of a Small Town has been brought to you in part by the Rotary Clubs of Brampton.
We're in the hallway of the Bovaird house. It's a typical Georgian-style house, which means that it's built on a center hall plan. Off the hall are various rooms, which we'll take you in later in the tour. We're here in the main front entrance of the Bovaird house. You'll notice the front door. It's in the Georgian style with original side lights around the windows. You may have noticed in the watercolor picture of the Bovaird house a veranda-type structure on the outside of the house. That was removed when the house was refurbished to the period between 1870 and 1920, as it was not in keeping with that time period. Once again, we have the original door hardware on this door. We're here in the dining room of the Bovaird house. We have here the third fireplace in the house, and it of course would have been used for heating purposes as well, and also for cooking. We have an original hearth on this fireplace made of bricks. At the end of the day, of course, the hearth would be swept and then the brush put in the bucket of water, and that was to avoid fires, which were such a hazard in those days. You'll notice on the mantel we have a picture here, and in this picture is William Bovaird. He's sitting there as the Reeve of Chinguacousy Township. Now, above his picture we have a lovely picture of Queen Victoria. It's authentic to the period, and the frame dates from the mid-1800s as well. During the Chisholm's life in the household, Queen Victoria, of course, would have been the reigning monarch. You'll notice here a very unique set of cabinets. These are original and authentic to the house. You'll also notice a similar set of cabinets in the parlor. These were put in by Peter Chisholm. He was a lover of books, and he would use them to store his books. Now, his wife would have liked to have china in there, and it was a constant struggle between books or china. However, in the dining room, there was likely some china kept in here. And the lower one would have been used for storage as well. You'll notice the coral color on the walls. That is, as I mentioned, researched, and that was authentic to the time period to have these vibrant colors. We have here a door which leads to the servery, and as mentioned earlier, the cooking would be done in the kitchen in the basement, the food brought up to the servery, and then brought through to the dining room for formal meals and special occasions. We're in the formal front parlor of the Bovaird house. You'll notice we've had quite a bit of furniture donated to this room. I'm sitting here on a lovely setting. This was a walnut carved structure made by Jackson Hay Furniture Factory from Toronto. It's dated about 1865. Now, Jackson Hay, interestingly enough, was located on the site of the present O'Keefe Centre, which some of you may be familiar with. We have the love seat, the chairs, and the rocker. And as well, we also have some furniture by the fireplace. This is fireplace number 4. It would have been primarily used for heating this room. And we have here a little settee before the fireplace. Now, you'll notice there's a screen over here, and that was often used by ladies to protect their faces from the fire. They would have on makeup, and their skin would be dry from the fire, so they would have these little screens. This particular one is hand needle-pointed from the mid-1800s. Now, on the side of the fireplace here, we have another set of cabinets which Peter Chisholm had installed in the home for his books. And you'll notice that these match exactly the cabinets which were in the dining room. This is a decorative pump organ from the mid-1800s. Often they would be found in the parlors of homes. People would come in, sit, and someone would play, and that would be the entertainment of the evening before the fire. And we're fortunate enough to have this pump organ on loan from the Peel Museum. Of course, we're always seeking donations for the house, and we welcome them. Off the living room, there was a small room here. This was often used as a bedroom for children and also as a sick room. When a child would be sick, the parents would like to have him or her on the lower floor so it was easier to nurse them. Mossy Bovaird used this room as a music room. And Joe, there's a modern washroom just off this now, and that was added in by Mr. Bovaird when Mossy Bovaird became ill. They had added in a modern washroom upstairs earlier. Of course, in the old days, they would have had outhouses on the property. We're coming up to the second level of the Bovaird house. I've just come up a lovely old original walnut staircase. It's long and it's narrow. Above the staircase would be the entrance to the attic, and there'd be a large ladder that would swing down. I'm in front of the only original cupboard in this house. It would be the closet. In those days, of course, people didn't have all the clothing we have today. They'd have their work clothes and then their Sunday best. This here is a blouse from the early 20th century. It was donated to the house, and we're always looking for donations of clothing, furniture, or other items. This is a lovely piece. It would have been typical, as I said, of the early 1900s period. The upstairs hall continues the Georgian-style pattern with rooms off to each side. Originally, there were 3 bedrooms on each side of the house. However, it's been modified by renovations and the addition of modern closets. At the other end of the hallway, we have a typical Georgian-style window. You'll remember from the outside shots of the house that there are 5 windows across the upper floor. Now, a lot of these planes would be the original handmade glass. We've got a pane here in the middle. You may not see it on the camera. It's got a ripple effect across it, which you can tell that it was hand-blown. These were brought over from England at the time of the original construction. And they would have been made by having the glass made on a plate of steel such that the rippling effect would have shown through. We're upstairs in the Bovaird house in one of the bedrooms. Mr. and Mrs. Bovaird used this as their master bedroom. It was originally 3 bedrooms. They converted the other rooms to a dressing room for Mossy Bovaird and an upstairs modern washroom. Now you'll notice some modern furniture in here, some modern desks and chairs. That's because the city of Brampton uses a lot of the upstairs room for organizing their programs and office space. This is Jackie Kennedy coming our way. She's with the City of Brampton Parks and Recreation Department. Hi, Jackie.
Hi, how are you?
Good. We just finished a tour of historic Bovaird House, and now I'd like you to tell the people about some of the modern uses of the house.
Sure. Okay. As Deanne mentioned, my name is Jackie Kennedy, and I'm acting supervisor for the Culture and Creative Programs for the City of Brampton. The Bovaird House is the first historic home donated to the City of Brampton in 1984 by the Bovairds. It is the role of the city to maintain and upkeep this unique historic home. Currently, the City of Brampton has an operating budget that keeps after the general maintenance of the house, heating, lighting, electricity, and any staffing that's required. In 1990, the Friends of Bovaird House Committee was formed to aid the City of Brampton and also give advice on how to furnish the home. It is the goal of the City of Brampton and the Friends of Bovaird House to establish a historic home which will represent the vision of Brampton's past. Eventually, with the help of community members, the Bovaird House will gain the status of a museum for all of us to enjoy and experience. At present, the City of Brampton rents out this unique historic home to city programs and to the general public for special occasions. As we move closer to our goal, the renting of this unique facility will dissipate and regular tours will begin. If you have any further questions or information that you could provide us, please do not hesitate to call me at the City of Brampton at 874-2329 or contact Gail Aikens at 874-2329.
Thank you for joining us for our tour of historic Bovaird House. Tune in again next week for another feature on historic Brampton, on Brampton, Memories of a Small Town.
Funding for Brampton Memories of a Small Town has been brought to you in part by the Rotary Clubs of Brampton.
To comment on the preceding program, please call the response line 24 hours a day at 456-0860. Your comments are appreciated.